Hello, folks. This is Michael Broussard. Welcome to Survivor Stories. Our guest today is Caralyn Dreyer. She is a writer, a survivor, a mental health blogger, and an advocate. She's graciously agreed to share her story today and to answer your questions. If you have a question for Caralyn or a comment you'd like to make or anything you'd like to share, all you need to do is go down to the bottom of your Zoom window. Click where it says Q&A, type in your question, your comment, anything you'd like to share. I will check those periodically throughout the presentation, and I'll read those off to Caralyn so she can respond. Caralyn, welcome to Survivor Stories. I appreciate you being here today.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I would like to start off by asking you to share anything you want to or you feel comfortable sharing about the abuse you experienced.
Yes, absolutely. So I was sexually assaulted when I was 19 years old. Um, this was my freshman year of college. So I had just spent a, several months, being on my own. I didn't have parents. I lived on campus. It was awesome. I could do whatever I wanted. Since I came from a small town, this was a exciting time, but also a dangerous time in that I was definitely not prepared to really like navigate being on my own in college. So it was Easter weekend. Um, a friend of mine and I were going to go visit some of her friends. Now, I'm not going to say the state where I live in, but she lived on the other side of the state from our college. So it was like a 2 hour drive. So she's like, yeah, a bunch of my guy friends are home from college. It was Easter weekend. So a lot of colleges have like a longer weekend. So we were going to go to my parents' house that Easter Sunday to have dinner with them, whatever. So Friday night and Saturday night or Saturday day was kind of like my time. So I was like, yeah, let's go to this party. So we made it to the other side of the state. Saturday rolls around. I was supposed to start heading to my parents' house that evening so that we would be there, in the morning for Easter service at church. But my friend was like, no, 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 let's go to this party. Let's go to this party. So I called my dad and I was like, hey, dad, I think we're going to just come to your house after you guys get home from church and eat dinner with you guys. And he's like, well, are you sure? I really think you guys should maybe just come tonight as planned. I was like, no, 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 that's okay. That's okay. So we ended up going to the mall, getting our outfits or whatever. Now, a lot of this story is like in chunks for several reasons. The two major reasons being that I was drinking alcohol that evening. And then, of course, the aspect of like surviving trauma and maybe not remembering certain things. If I had to guess, I'm sure most of my memories probably due to the alcohol drinking or whatever. So, we make our way to this party. So I want to clarify that this did not happen on a college campus. It was just a college party at someone's house who my friend knew. So we start partying and drinking. To my recollection, it was just myself and my friend being the only females there. I don't recall if any other females were there. Um, but again, these were people she knew. There were maybe two or three people that I was familiar with because they went to our college. So the night progresses, there's like music, dancing around. I was extremely intoxicated. Um, I did not have alcohol until my first year of college. Actually, my friends thought I was pretending to be drunk, but I was like actually drunk in the first time I drank because I'd never had alcohol before. So by the time this party came around, I had already kind of been being a party girl and drinking or whatnot. So at this party, I was extremely intoxicated. Um, I don't remember if it was to the point where anybody was like concerned necessarily. I'm pretty sure I was like socializing and functioning enough that nobody was really concerned. So at some point, my friend was like, I need to go drop my boyfriend off or go pick him up. I'll be back. I was like, okay, that's fine. Um, I guess I must have felt comfortable because I really didn't press the issue. I didn't say, oh, let me go with you, whatever. So she left. Now, the next thing I remember is, well, let me backtrack real quick. She was supposed to return, and she and I were going to spend the night at this house. It was a house, like there were several bedrooms. So, fast forward now to what I recall next is waking up on a mattress and I was naked. So I can only imagine that I was probably passed out from the alcohol. So I remember like trying to like wake up and, figure out what the heck was going on. And I realized that somebody was having intercourse with me. So I like froze like you typically hear. I did not scream. I did not fight. Tears just streamed down my face. And someone noticed because I heard someone say, oh, followed by an expletive. And a light comes on. And there was definitely more than one individual in there, unclothed. I've shared this story before, but since the premise of this show, I'm sharing some details I've never really shared before. There was more than one individual who was not clothed. Obviously, they scattered. Um, I don't remember if I like what I was doing at that point. I remember at some point somebody sat with me because my friend wasn't there. Now, I have no idea the time span of this incident. I do remember that while someone was sitting with me, comforting me, I mean, daylight was coming up because there was a window. I remember, I can picture it right now. I remember a window and I could tell like it wasn't dark outside, like daylight was coming up. So, whether this memory was maybe I fell asleep while this person was here and then I woke up in the morning, or if it was in fact morning and I never really like went back to sleep after the incident, I don't remember. But I tried calling my friend. She didn't answer, but at some point she did come and pick me up. Now, I don't again recall too much of that situation. We went to go to a diner to get breakfast before heading to my parents' house. And I told her what happened. And the only thing I remember her saying was, well, I hope you don't think that this is my fault. And this will be kind of significant. Yeah, this will be kind of significant later. Again, I don't remember what my reaction was. All I know is I have to be prepared to go have Easter dinner with my mom and my dad and my two younger brothers and pretend like none of this happened. So it was, I think, like I said, maybe about a 2 hour drive. We go to my parents, we have Easter dinner. I don't know if they thought anything was wrong with me other than maybe I would look tired, but I did not cry. I just acted like business as usual, which seems maybe surprising to people, but given the fact that I kind of grew up not feeling safe to like express my emotions, honestly, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, I had fingernail marks in my hand from trying to, regulate myself. But other than that, it really wasn't difficult for me to hide my feelings because I was used to that as, from childhood to an adult. So we finished dinner. We end up going back to our college campus. I don't remember talking to this friend. anymore. Like that day, I called another friend and she was like, you have to go to the YWCA. You have to go talk to somebody. And I didn't want to go that day. I went the next day, if I'm recalling this correctly. However, I had showered um in between that time frame, which again, I'm going to share some details where that actually really didn't matter. So we show up at the YWCA. They do a rape kit. Um, and so they do the thing. They ask me questions. I don't remember the questions or I don't remember any of that. So next thing I know, somebody comes in and they're like, we have the results or whatever. So the lady says that we found a condom stuck inside of you. Yeah. So that was like kind of being traumatized all over again because you sit there and you just, I don't know, you just think about that. And it's just like, wow. It made it real, I guess, because like I said,
Hmm.
I don't remember the actual whatever happened to me, but that made it real. So again, we she was like, we have to set up this and that, like counseling, whatever. I went to one follow-up appointment. Um, but after that, I didn't continue with it because I wanted to be done with it. I was getting ready to go back home for the summer to live with my parents, and I never really contemplated telling them. I don't really think that was ever an option for me. And looking in hindsight, I think I've always kind of had like an underlying understanding for my parents' capacity to handle like emotional things.
Hmm.
And also the fact that I was kind of the black sheep of the family, I worried that their response wouldn't be that it was my fault per se, but oh, well, you didn't, follow what we said, or that's like that type of thing. And purely for them, it would just have been from a place of like being emotionally unavailable or equipped, I should say. They were not equipped. And I think I recognize that. So there was communication with the local police department where it happened. I really don't remember the details of that, but I did not, you know, do the process of filing an actual police report for several reasons. The main two of the main ones, one, I didn't want my parents to find out, and number two, for some reason, I don't know why, but I knew that when you have cases of rape that go to court, or even just at the starting phases, if you're drinking, if witnesses there would say, oh yeah, she was having a good time, she was partying, she was all over everybody, which I'm not saying they wouldn't have been lying, you know what I mean, because I don't remember how I was acting, but the fact that my credibility would have been questioned because I was being a typical college student, albeit maybe naive and irresponsible to a certain degree. I didn't think I was going to be taken seriously. And then I fast forward to, well, what if this goes to court? I know for a fact that at least three of the individuals at that party were football players and good ones. And you know how that goes. Um, it's college athletes, oh, she was asking for it. Like, I just was not going to put myself through that being a possible situation, which I knew it would. I knew it would. And they had physical evidence. How much that would have helped me in my case, I really don't know because, I never looked into that. I don't know that it matters. But like I said, so I didn't end up filing a police report. Years later, I did get the courage, but the statute of limitations had run out. And that again was like another like punch in the gut. Like great. I'm ready to finally, deal with this. And I couldn't. And I understood because at this time, I think I was in school for criminal justice. So I understood how the legal system works and I get it. But I'm thinking, like, what the heck am I supposed to do now? Like, I'm not going to get justice or even be able to really do anything. So I went on my merry way through life. And that was a defining moment, that sexual assault, because what would happen after that was being in domestic violence relationships and a whole bunch of other stuff because I had unresolved trauma inside of me. I became dependent on alcohol. I almost died from alcohol poisoning. I had a suicide attempt. It was a mess. And so that's pretty much. Oh, I meant to say, when the friend said, I hope you don't think this is my fault. Now, weeks after, certainly people at my college knew about it. I wasn't like broadcasting it, but close friends knew. And it was brought up to me by several people that it could have possibly been one of those situations where, oh, do you have a friend? And I had a reputation as a party girl, and that does not by any means excuse what was done to me. However, I do think that I was portrayed in some type of light to where, I don't know, people just thought maybe they could do certain things. So that was talked about amongst people that I knew, that I was possibly set up. And whether it was done in a malicious intent or just merely her guy friends are like, hey, you have any cute friends? I don't know. And I'm not going to really continue to talk too much about that because I don't know what I don't know. But it was talked about with people that I knew that it possibly was a setup. And it was an interesting response that she was. I can't imagine somebody sharing with me that they were sexually assaulted, on my watch, and me being defensive about it. So I'm just going to say that she gave a defensive response. Maybe she felt uncomfortable and that's why, but it is what it is. But
Mhm.
that is pretty much the experience I had.
There's so much there to unpack, and I really appreciate you being that incredibly forthright about what you've been
Absolutely.
through. That must have been very difficult, and I appreciate the courage that took.
Thank you.
Um, the response of your friend is the first thing that I want to talk about. Um, I think that people need to be more educated as to how to respond to someone who's been through this kind of assault.
Yeah.
And that was the wrong response. And you're
Yes.
surrounded by a community that doesn't know the right response. That is no excuse.
No, no,
Kindness is the should be the response.
absolutely.
We actually have a question here. Let me check and
Yeah,
see what
sure.
that is. Kathleen says, I am sorry you were assaulted. Thank you for sharing. You are brave and
Oh,
precious.
oh, thank you, Kathleen. That's so sweet. That's so sweet. It's hard to share those hard details, but as we were speaking before this, I have a limited amount of time left. And if I'm going to have a purpose, I am more than willing to share the dirty, details, because that's how I'm going to be able to heal. And that's how maybe I'm able to help others heal too.
You mentioned that we had been talking before, and one of the things we talked about in direct relation to this was that 35 to 55 number, which a lot of us have heard that that's around the time age-wise that a lot of survivors suddenly come to the point where maybe they could have prosecuted if the opportunity still existed, statute of limitations, where they could start dealing with it, where they could start working on healing from it.
Mhm.
And I personally have no patience for the concept of a statute of limitations on sex crimes.
Yeah,
It is a misunderstanding of what the crime is. It is a misunderstanding of the impact on the victim. Um, that kind of crime should not have a statute of limitations because they don't, because it's, I think sometimes an intentional misunderstanding, a willful misunderstanding.
yeah.
So, certain people are protected. How do you feel about statute of limitations when it comes to these kinds of crimes?
Um, I I don't agree with them, but at the same time, I remember doing research about backlogged rape kits in police departments. And it's like, okay, you whether you have a statute of limitations or not, I'm not quite sure that it's a speedy trial or, that type of process. So I don't know. I guess I'm on the fence with that because I guess in my mind, whether they have them or not, I just don't feel like a lot of entities of the legal system are educated enough on how to handle survivors, including whether it's police interviewing or whatever follows after that. I just think there just needs to be more education all around. And once we're educated, then maybe we can start to be like, okay, is this statute of limitations appropriate? I mean, I don't even know. I guess at the same token, why do we have it? Because, like you said,
Hmm.
it's like,
You
do I
could
have
be
to have
60
someone
or
repeat?
70 and suddenly you
Right.
realize that you can stand up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know. I didn't give a really clear answer on that. I just think, I guess maybe I'm a little, what's the word? I don't know, pessimistic towards the legal system in a lot of ways, but
I can't imagine why you would possibly, or any survivor would possibly be pessimistic toward the legal system.
and
When we have
it's,
situations like,
yeah,
and you talked about football players.
yeah,
You know, we could talk about a certain guy who was a great swimmer who got a
yeah,
suspended sentence because, he's a great guy. Yes, he committed murder, but he committed rape, soul murder,
right.
same thing. He
Yeah,
committed rape, but he's a great guy. It's no wonder that people like you, people who've been through this, are reticent about stepping forward. I want to say really quick for some people who just joined. If you want to ask Carolyn a question or make a comment or share something of your own, you can click on Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window and type that in, and I will check those out periodically throughout our interview. I want to roll back a little bit to what you were saying about your family and
yeah,
about how you came home and you just held it in and, marks in your hand,
yeah,
and I get that completely. I absolutely understand that. And you knew that you couldn't say anything.
yeah,
Because I think that's a frequent thing.
yeah.
Um, how do you feel that needs to change with families, with parents, with mothers, with fathers?
You know, if I look at the reason why, one of the reasons why I did not talk to them, I just would say that I think as parents, or if you're a caregiver, you need to allow your child the opportunity to express their emotions. And if it's uncomfortable for you, you as a parent owe it to that child to figure out how to make it not uncomfortable because you are severely, severely, severely crippling your child by not letting them express their emotions. Now, I'm not saying that you let them be super pissed off and like destroy property or you encourage them to cry all day long. What I am saying is there's like a healthy balance of teaching your child to express their emotions, but also build like a certain level of resilience. I think that if I had felt safe to express my emotions, maybe I would have felt more comfortable to share. But there's so many even complex things with that. I mean, because of not expressing my emotions, like I became a people pleaser. Like there was like all sorts of different things that were wrapped up in there as to why I couldn't tell people I who raised me that
Hmm.
people hurt me. And yeah, I just think that we have to let our kids feel their feelings and teach them how to cope with them. And if you can't do that, swallow your pride and ask for help.
Right.
I've already told my son, if you ever feel like there's something you can't tell me or someone close to you, I will go get you a therapist. We will find a therapist. You can, because I don't ever want my child to feel like they have no one to talk to because I was that child and I don't want to make my parents seem like they neglected me so terribly. But I just want my son to feel differently than how I felt as a child and to have every avenue possible to express his emotions.
And that's absolutely beautiful. And you are clearly one of the good ones. I wish I had, I hear a lot of survivors talk about this. I wish I had parents like the parent that you are now, because my life would have been entirely different. We have a couple of more questions here from Anne. Perhaps the statutes of limitations exist to protect the perpetrator. They only have so long to hold their breath and then they can breathe again. How many are those that make these policies perpetrators themselves? Think about the rumors of sex parties in DC using foster kids.
Hmm, right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a
I've
great
used a
point.
phrase, and it's a harsh phrase, and it's going to come up pretty harsh. But when I look at these judges who make these judgments and give them suspended sentences or let them off, they're preserving their own right to rape, because they don't consider their actions to be sexual assault, although they are. And
Absolutely.
that's a thing I carry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's why we need to have advocacy and awareness and education for everybody, every single person.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. We have one other question here from Trisha. Carolyn talked about being a person who enjoyed to party. I have watched programs and read books about rape in colleges, and it is absolutely nothing to do with the character of the female and all to do with the permission men are given to do as they wish and not face consequences. How do you respond to that?
I mean, that's like right on point. That's one of the reasons why I was hesitant to report it because it's like, oh, boys will be boys, or, she was asking for it. And it's so sad that to this day, sometimes when I tell that story, I label myself as a party girl. It doesn't matter if I walked around naked every day on campus. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
realistically, it doesn't warrant what was done to me. And she's so right. Like, it's just, and especially when you have athletes or you have celebrities or you have a politician or these people that have like power and
Hmm.
like status and stuff. And then the victim or survivor is made to look like some lowly, couldn't get it together person. And this other person is pretty much glorified, like, oh, how dare they, and now, yes, people do get falsely accused. Absolutely. They absolutely do. However, there's just, I don't know, so many survivors out there to yet to even speak up. You know what I mean? So, yeah, she's absolutely right with that.
There are also stats on false accusations, and the stats show that false accusations are so tiny compared to
Yeah.
the number of actual assaults that go on,
Yeah.
and compared to the number of assaults that aren't reported. And
Yes.
assaults aren't reported for many of the reasons we've been talking about, which is you're surrounded by a community and a justice system that's going to judge you rather than the perpetrator. The
Yeah.
alcohol thing is a big thing. I mean, you told your story, and you sit there and you've talked about the fact that you were probably drunk, and that has nothing to do, as you said, nothing to do
Yeah.
with whether this was an assault or not. This was an assault. It
Yeah.
is the responsibility, it is the job of other people not to take advantage of you. And if they can't simply maintain that as a code in their life, then they are people who have serious predatory issues. And there's
Absolutely.
absolutely no excuse for it.
No.
Um, I want to talk about, again, we're going to go back to this 35-55 thing.
Yeah.
There came a point in my life where I started to realize that, okay, either I talk about it or I don't talk about it. And what do I do? And
Yeah.
I've gotten past that. I'm no longer surrounded by the community trying to stop me from talking about it. And, what do I do now?
Yeah.
What was the point and how did it feel? Well, how did you reach that point where you felt like you could start to A, talk about it, and B, also deal with whatever steps you took to heal from it?
Well, I'll say this. I didn't, after it happened, I wasn't one of those survivors that like locked it up and like never talked about it again. And in fact, any dating relationship I've had, any close friendship I've had, those people know that I was raped. I try to be as authentic as possible because it's just miserable to have to not be yourself. And with that being said, if I'm dating, because the unresolved trauma of it did show up in dating relationships. And I also wanted to give the person the opportunity to run for the hills, if they chose to do so, but I try to be honest about stuff like that. So from the age of 19, I'm 43 now, it's something that's always been talked about. So from that, I think that part of it sort of helped me heal. Um, but was that last year? No, it was, I think 2 years ago. I was just feeling like cruddy. I'm like, I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I felt miserable. I know that I have all this unresolved trauma that I really need to keep unpacking. So, what in the heck am I supposed to do? And I think it was maybe Sexual Assault Awareness Month, possibly, where I made a post on Instagram. And so that was my first time like publicly letting this out. And I received, warm comments like, oh, you're brave. If you ever need to speak about it, whatever, we're here. So that was like the catalyst. And then, of course, I look at my son, and if I don't figure this stuff out, the way I parent him is going to be affected. And I want to do whatever I can that's possible for him to not be 43 doing a survivor story or whatever type of situation could happen. So it was mostly because I don't want to be responsible for having, another unhealed person be out here in the world, well, including myself, but also my son. I just don't want him to have to suffer the burdens of like unhealed trauma or like generational trauma, even. Um, And so once I started doing that, I started submitting magazine articles to share my story, and it gets easier and easier. And even now at 43, look, I still have a hard time not saying that it wasn't my fault. Like I logically and like the academic and all that side of me knows it wasn't my fault. But
Mm-hmm.
the other part of me still makes excuses. I've even told myself that I gave those offenders another chance at life. I tell myself that sometimes.
No, no, no.
Oh,
I get
yes.
it.
I would
I
tell
get it though.
myself, yeah, like, well, I hope, and I do feel guilty too. Like, I hope they didn't do this again. But then to help myself get through it, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I gave them a new lease on life. I hope they're not taking advantage of it. I mean, I'm going to be honest, it makes me sound like a little cuckoo, but that's what survivors, the thoughts you go through to try to reconcile things and make sense out of things. And it seems backwards to people, but maybe it's because I was raised in church and I have Christian beliefs that that's how I'm able to have that mentality. Do I forgive them? Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Do I forgive someone who stepped on my foot? Yeah, I forgive them for that. Do I forgive someone who raped me? No, I don't forgive them for that, and I shouldn't have to. And nor do I need to do that to move on. I need
Right,
to forgive
exactly.
myself. And as a healing process, I realize I need to forgive myself. I was, even though it was not my fault, I was a very damaged and hurt person during that time in life. So, what about that can I make better to help me heal? So I have like a lot of different thoughts and things that fly around in my head during this healing process, but that's what healing is. You have weird thoughts in your head that nobody understands, and that's okay. If that's what helps you get through it. Now, I don't want people to think that I'm condoning like falling into those negative thoughts and beliefs and believing
Hmm.
those things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you just really need to dive into the healing process. Like you just got to go all in.
Right. And you brought up something very interesting with the whole forgiveness thing, because there's certainly a movement uh, from some survivors, but also from many non-survivors that say you must forgive your abuser and you can't move on until you forgive your abuser. And obviously, you don't believe that from what you said. I don't believe that. I do believe that healing is an individual process,
Hmm.
and that if forgiveness helps that
Yep,
individual to move on or to heal in any way, that is what they should do. But at the same
absolutely.
time, don't tell somebody else what this path is, because
Yeah,
all of us have our own path and we can share and we can, give perspectives, but we
yeah.
can't tell people exactly how to heal. We have another question here. Laura says, Carolyn, thank you for sharing your story. You did not cause this to happen to you. We are not allowed to talk about these things, and we should. The stereotypical she asked for it BS has to end. I used to have that viewpoint until I was raped. What helps when you get triggered?
Oh, oh my gosh. That's such a good question because those triggers, they do happen and they've showed up in relationships, especially when it comes to physical things. Like, how in the heck do you even, get yourself to even do that kind of stuff again? And the number one thing that I think helps me the most when I am triggered is to let myself sit with it because I'm a flight person. I'm going to take flight when things get tricky or uncomfortable. And I get very, very physical responses to triggers. And so I let myself sit with it. Now, obviously, if I was in some kind of like physical danger or something like that, I would seek support. But I sit with the uncomfortable feeling and remind myself that I have to start looking at life through a living perspective and not a survival mode perspective.
Hmm.
And if I continue to fly away from these tricky feelings, I'm going to continue to be in survival mode. And in some aspects, I there are certain parts of my life that I probably will struggle and be in survival mode from time to time, but sitting with those feelings and maybe even identifying like why am I feeling this way and then reminding yourself that this situation is safe. I have to tell myself you are safe. You are safe. And don't let me get teared up here, but safety. Yeah.
It's a hard
Oh my
thing to
gosh.
to believe in. It's a
Yeah,
hard thing to believe in when you've
it
been
is.
through this. I mean,
It is.
I am 60 years
Absolutely.
old. I still get moments where
Yeah.
everything comes crashing in again and I don't feel safe. And
Yeah.
I know this is difficult for you to talk about this, and I
Oh, I'm
appreciate
okay.
you
Yeah,
being
I'm
so
good.
forthright again about it. But yeah, hmm, to sit with the triggers is a really hard
Yeah.
thing to do. So that's a lot of courageousness on your part, but obviously a very helpful thing to
Yeah.
do. Um, if you were going to give advice to somebody
Mhm.
who had been through an experience similar to yours, or maybe dissimilar but in the same area, what advice would you give them about how to deal with that, how to work on themselves, how to work on healing?
Well, the first thing I would say is if it's something that you believe in, please go to therapy, especially trauma-informed therapy or whatever works for you. But that's one thing that I kind of missed the boat on was I do wish I would have had the strength to go to therapy. Um, and of course you can always go later in life, but the sooner the better. The sooner the better. And you can't I don't want to say I've been doing it alone per se. I've had therapy here and there throughout life, but for the most part I've kind of done it alone. You don't you don't want to do that if possible. It's very exhausting. I actually went into psychology. I have a master's in forensic psychology, so I think in a lot of ways getting an education in criminal justice and forensic psychology was like helpful with the healing process, but go to therapy. If you can do it, please go to therapy. If therapy's not for you, please find a supportive person. You don't even have to have a huge support group, but support groups are helpful too. But the main thing is you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. It's not even enough to just write it in a journal. I'm sorry, it's not. You have to talk about it with somebody. Um, and then I'm sorry, I got lost like the other parts of your question there.
I was asking, and you're answering it beautifully. What would you suggest to people who are trying to heal from something like this?
Yeah. And no, for me, I don't think there's necessarily going to be like a final destination in this healing process.
Yes. Hmm.
Yes, days are going to get easier, days are going to be better, but history has told me that there's going to be times where that's not the case. There's just not. And don't let that deter you because it will. It's deterred me for the last 2 decades because I've been on this healing path before. Not as engaged as I am now, but I've been on the healing path, and when those times got rough, I was like, yeah, you can't fix me. It's just it's a lost cause. We're done with this for the next 10 years. And then it would pick up again, but stay engaged in the process as much as possible and know that you're not going to get, maybe you will get to a point, whoever you are, where you're free from everything, because I'm sure that does happen for some people. But it's not going to happen for everybody, and that's okay as long as you're taking either a giant leap forward or a tiny baby step forward. Just stay the course and don't let those rough days tell you that you're not worth it, you're not worthy, you're alone, nobody cares. That's not true. That's your trauma and your unhealed parts of yourself telling
Hmm.
you that, because it's trying to get you back into survival mode because it's easier. It is. It's not, but it is. It's easier for me to be a busybody for 2 days straight than to sit and deal with stuff. So I would just encourage people to stay engaged in the process.
And isn't that, the truth of the whole thing, which is that sometimes we are in survival mode and sometimes we're healing and sometimes we're just protecting.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay to have days where all you can do is just deal with what's directly in front of you and you
Yeah.
can't, if something comes along that has to do with the trauma, not now. And you can do
Yep.
it later. But the other thing that rang true with me very strongly is talking about survival and healing as healing is not being a destination. I always say that healing is an ongoing
Yep.
state of being for me. There's
Yes.
not a big bright light at the end that's I'm healed. And maybe some people, like you say, do have that. But
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. I think it hurt my healing to believe that there had to be an end and why haven't I achieved that yet? And I would
Yes.
judge myself.
Yes.
So it's very helpful to hear somebody else say this. We have
Mhm.
another question here. Trisha says, you show so much courage to share your story and express your feelings. Thank you. My trauma was caused by a different experience, but so much of what you say resonates with me. I have had years of good trauma-informed therapy and am learning to live lighter with the trauma residing within. I grew tired of allowing the life thief from stealing joy and laughter from me.
Yep. So relatable. Yeah. Absolutely. You just get to a point where, I don't know, you look around and depending on when your trauma or situation happened, it stunts life development. I wasn't, maybe I would have been married and had like a huge family had I dealt with things. Like you kind of miss out on things, and you see like your peers and colleagues like getting married and getting this job and just floating around and like happy as can be. And then you're like, what the heck's wrong with this picture over here? But you can have that. It's just going to look different. Everybody's happy ending is going to look different. And with any kind of trauma, when you feel like you're healing from it, that's not the end of it. It's not like, oh, okay, like I dealt with that and okay, let's just close it away. We're done. It's not. It's still there. You don't just get cured from trauma per se, you know?
Yes, exactly. And as the questioner was saying, you're allowed joy.
Yeah.
You're allowed joy. You're
Yes.
allowed those mo you're allowed like, okay, here's this thing. I can also enjoy this thing over here. And my life doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be about this. Um, I want to roll back a bit to you had alluded to early relationships. And how do you think that your trauma experience impacted those early relationships and landed you in the kind of places that you were at?
Oh gosh. Well, now I did have a couple of like semi-healthy relationships in there, and God bless those exes. Like one of them, God bless him, like for real, because he actually knew something was going on with me. I'm adopted, so he kind of thought it was more trauma related to being adopted. But the other relationships, because I was not engaged in the healing process, I was obviously not loving myself. So if you don't love yourself, do you think you're going to go out there and find the best match for you? Yeah, you think you are, but it's misguided. It's you're finding a match based on you thinking you're the worst or you're unlovable or you're not worthy. And when you think that about yourself, it is easy to become susceptible to abusive relationships. Um, and I was in two of them. And I will say it was definitely a result of not being healed from that sexual assault. Because when you've had something like that happen to you, you literally feel like a dirty person. And I thought that my worth was in physical things. And so from that point on, I was actually afraid to tell someone no if they wanted to. Yes. Yeah. I was afraid to say no. And I think a big part of that was because I was not conscious. Thank God. I do thank God that I actually was not conscious when this was happening. But I think because I wasn't, I do have a fear to this day of being attacked because I can't imagine being awake when something like that happens. I
Hmm.
can't. And it led just to a mess of relationships, domestic violence. Um, so it's just so important that if you're a survivor, whether you tell your story as soon as it happens or you get the courage years later, it's going to show up in your relationships. Maybe not to the extent of abuse or domestic violence, but you're going to probably settle. If you don't fully love yourself, you're going to settle. And I settled for abusers, telling myself, like, well, they like me sometimes. So that's something. It's sad, but that's what I would tell myself. Well, they love me sometimes. So I thought that's the norm. I was like, well, this is
Hmm.
probably normal. People argue, whatever, but it's just you'll have a diluted perspective if you just don't find a way to deal with that trauma.
You used the word earlier, people pleaser, and then you just said now not being able to say no.
Yeah,
And obviously that was specifically having to do with something.
yeah,
But I think beyond that, that people pleaser, everything, not being able to say no. I know I found myself for years in relationships trying to figure out what the person I was with wanted me to be that would make them the most happy because
yeah,
that was the relationship I had with my abusers was I was trying to make them happy because if they were happy, I was a little bit safer, you
yeah,
know? And I don't think there's any shame in having that happen to you because you're not to blame for what happened to you, and you're
yeah,
not to blame for the fact that you got that people pleaser thing inside of you because of it.
yeah.
How is it different now when it comes to friendships, relationships, as you move beyond or to some degree beyond that people pleaser place where you can sometimes say no to things?
Oh gosh, it's like a world of difference in a lot of ways. I do feel like more comfortable advocating for myself and speaking up for myself. I feel more comfortable with setting boundaries. And honestly, it's like so liberating to just be like, I don't give a F. Like, you don't like what I just
Yes.
said, or you don't like this or that. Like, I don't care. That's your, like, I just love now when somebody's trying to like drag down my day, I can just tell myself, girl, that's their problem. Let's carry on. Like you said, I get to be happy. I don't have to let this numbskull like ruin my day because they're having a bad day. Like, I get to be like, bye. Like I get to have the freedom to tell someone bye or whatever the case may be. But I will also say I'm in a period of exhaustion. And I say that it's very hard for me right now to maintain friendships. I do have friendships, but I have to work extremely, I have to put a lot of effort into it because I've
Yeah.
had repeated, after the sexual assault, it was repeated trauma, this. And now at the age of 43, I'm tired. I don't know if it's too early to be tired, but I'm tired. And I just have like a limited amount of energy for stuff. But I'm telling myself, like, that's okay. And
Hmm.
at this point, whoever's in my life is supposed to be there. And we talked about this, I think, before the recording, how you, and you get older, you just put people in a category so you can just, keep moving and not worry
Right.
about it. You're an
Hmm.
acquaintance, you're the neighbor I say hi to every other day, you're my best friend, you're this, you're that. And it helps. It helps to ease the people pleasing. Because if you're the neighbor I say hi to every other day, I'm sorry, I don't really care to like please you all the time because you're just a neighbor. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But you get to kind of like divvy up that energy as you see fit when you place people where they need to be in your life.
That's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Um, we're coming close to the end, so before we go, is there anything else we have not talked about that you would like to talk about?
Um, you know what? I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I would like to remind, whoever's watching this, like we only just talked about one thing that I've been through. I'm a survivor who's been through multiple things. And I think, when that's the case and you figure out later in life what you're really dealing with, it can be a little disheartening. It really can. It can be a little disheartening, like why you have regrets, but you can't live with those regrets because then it steals, like the person was saying, it steals your joy,
Hmm.
So just duality. There's duality. You can be super bummed out one day, and then even maybe that same day, you can be laughing hysterically at something. It doesn't mean you're crazy or you're like unbalanced. You're very balanced, actually, if you're able. Well, okay, clinically speaking, you got to have like a safe, healthy balance. You don't necessarily want one extreme or the other, but those things can coexist in the same minute, the same second, the same hour. It's all,
Yes.
healing is kind of a crapshoot in a lot of ways. And when it's a crapshoot, there's no right or wrong way, in my opinion. Well, okay, there are wrong ways, but in but generally speaking, you just have to do what works best for yourself.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate everything you've said today. Thank you for sharing so openly. This has been one of our best, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
My heart, you have a friend here, just so you know.
Oh,
You don't have to consider
likewise.
me a friend, but you have a friend here.
Oh,
Um,
likewise.
that's all I'm saying.
Oh,
Before we go, I need to remind people of a few things. Uh, let me do this. Okay. If you want to learn more about Carolyn, to read her writing, to learn more about what she shares, what she does, and how she can help, go to her blog at carolyndreyer.blogspot.com. carolyndreyer.blogspot.com. If you want to make sure that you know about the next time we do a Survivor Stories or a Survivor Poetry reading or one of our plays or anything like that, if you want to keep in contact with us, subscribe to our newsletter askasurvivor.beehive.com. That's Beehiiv, two eyes, beehive.com. If you want to get a hold of me specifically, you can email me at askasurvivor@gmail.com. That includes anyone who wants to do one of these interviews, or if you want to read your poetry online, or anything you want to contact us about. We are open. We are a healing community. We do survivor groups as well, which you'll be reminded of if you're on the mailing list. So I want to thank one more time, Carolyn. I want to check this last question we have here. Oh, it's Anne, my friend Anne, who is wonderful, saying thank you, Michael, for continuing to provide this platform and to your guest for being so open. So thank you as well to Carolyn. Thank you to everybody. We will see you all at the next one. Have a great day.